Hello. Welcome to the Follow Your Feet podcast where we discuss expat life. Today, my guest is a longtime friend, Clay. Clay, welcome.
That's me. Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me here today.
So obviously you are an expat as well, but before we get into your expat experiences, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, where you grew up?
Yeah, that's right. A good question because I grew up in kind of a not so well-known place. So I'm from Redding, California. I guarantee most people have never heard of it, but
Well, everyone's heard of California.
This is true. But even probably most people in California have never heard of Redding. So
All right, well, tell us about Redding.
Yeah, where to begin? So basically. Imagine everything. Everything you can imagine when it comes to California. Think like the polar opposite. That's Redding. So it's not on the coast. It's inland, surrounded by mountains, forests, state national parks, two really large lakes. One of the biggest dams, Shasta Dam in the U.S. is there. And it's not liberal at all, like you would also probably imagine from California. It's very conservative. It's pretty much become, I would say, even like one of the MAGA epicenters.
Well, I suppose that's an anomaly in the state of California.
Yes. California is not known for being conservative at all, and it's extremely conservative there. It's like they outnumber Democrats like 3-1.
But that's okay. What was it like to grow up there?
No, nice. A very working class as well. Again, people picture, California being a pretty wealthy state, and it's again, very working class, like lower middle to middle class folks.
What is like the main industries there? What people do for work?
Back in the day, it used to be things like logging. Timber, yeah.
Are we talking like redwood trees?
That was a huge one.
Is it redwood forests? I imagine it would be in Northern California, isn't it?
There's a huge valley, the Central Valley in California. It's the Sacramento Valley in the north. It's all the same valley, but the northern part's considered the Sacramento Valley, and the southern part's considered the San Joaquin Valley. And Redding is at the very tip top of the valley. So
the north end.
Exactly. Literally just before the valley. It's surrounded by forests and mountains on all sides, to the north, east, and west. Yeah. But it is in the valley, so it is really hot. So a lot of people there, especially a long time ago, before people had air conditioning, which you can imagine is insane, and not having air conditioning in a place like this where it regularly gets over 100, even 110 in the summertime. So people used to, like my grandma, back in the day, they would just go down to the river and just hang out by the Sacramento River, which goes through town all day.
Do people actually swim in the river?
They don't anymore because when they used to, again, back in her day, but then when they put the dam in, it basically made it colder. Because all the water's just coming from the very bottom of this massive lake, Shasta Lake, which is hundreds of feet deep.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe it's like 500 feet deep or something like that. It's a big lake.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So these days there isn't really much of a viable industry, and most people who have a college degree, younger people, they end up moving somewhere else. Technically, I think maybe less than 20% of people there have a bachelor's degree or something. But
isn't there also a lot of, like Central Valley is a lot of agriculture, or maybe that's more to the southern end of Central Valley, maybe?
Yeah, there's a bit of that there as well. Some of the towns south of it, they're definitely into that. We have about an hour south of us. We have a couple of smaller towns. Let's see, Arbuckle and Williams, and when these two teams, when their high schools play each other, they call it the Rice Bowl. Yeah, so
they grow a lot of rice there.
A lot of rice, in these parts. So, but Redding, actually, the main industry, a lot of people don't realize this is actually tourism.
Well, I know Mount Shasta is known for being quite beautiful, and there's kind of like a new age connection to Mount Shasta, because some people think or have reported, like, I don't know, UFOs or paranormal stuff around Mount Shasta.
Oh, yeah.
Mount Shasta.
Oh,
So it's kind of
100%.
known for being that. So I don't know if that also draws the New Age.
That's right.
crowd.
Yeah, some people are familiar with Mount Shasta. It is, one of the biggest mountains, probably even in the U.S. It's a good 14,500 feet, I want to say, which is something like 4,400 meters. So it's pretty good size. There's a ski and snowboard park there. Yes, a lot of, I guess you'd say, New Age people, right? Like you said. My dad used to call them the cosmic muffins. They have a lot of different monikers, I guess. But
So your family is probably, I think, what most people would envision as maybe being a typical middle-class American family. Is that fair?
Exactly. Yeah, we were very much like middle class. But if you can make even like a middle class salary in Reading, which is a much more affordable city to live in than most of California's big cities, then you can live a very high quality of life there. A lot of people don't in that area, unfortunately. There's definitely some poverty, but if you can make even just a decent, fairly average amount of money, then you're doing fine. Yeah, and if you're into nature, that's the thing there. Again, I said tourism, so like the mountains, the lakes, hiking. We have tons of like river trails, bicycle trails. The first ever organized mountain bike race in the U.S. took place there.
Okay.
In Shasta County, not far from Whiskey Town, which is
Whiskey
the name of one of the lakes.
Town.
Yeah.
Wow.
No joke. Yeah.
Let's make a trip to Whiskey Town.
Yes. Yeah. There's a tiny little old western town that's not really a town anymore. But when it was first starting up, they had like a general store sort of thing,
Okay.
and it was the name of the little town there was Whiskey Town. So now it's Whiskey Town Lake.
So
Yeah.
a bit of a frontier vibe, I suppose.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it too. Especially with some of the surrounding towns, when you start to head west, you can take a highway there. I-5 goes up through it, which is the biggest highway on the west coast. It literally goes, from Canada all the way down to Mexico. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I-5 goes through it, and there's a highway directly from Reading west over to Humboldt to the coast that you can take. It's a very old, narrow, windy highway, and it's a solid 3-hour drive if you want to get to the coast. So people, whenever they first meet me, they're like, oh, you're from California, you must surf, right?
Yeah.
They think the whole stereotype is it's like Baywatch.
Yeah.
I always say that's how they think we all live
Yeah.
out there. I'm like, no, and like, really, you don't? I'm like, again, it's a solid 3-hour drive to the ocean. And even then, that's the minimum drive. Like, that's the quickest drive you can get to the ocean. And
it
then,
might not be like an ideal location for surfing anyways.
You took the words right out of my mouth.
So
Yes.
it's not...
The water's very cold this far north in California.
Yeah.
You have to get down... If you have family in the Bay Area.
Yeah, my
right?
brother and his family live in the Bay Area, so I have been to the Bay Area. So
Right.
people don't realize that Northern Cal, like the ocean, is very cold.
Very cold.
It's like the same when we went
yeah.
to Portugal. Beautiful beach. We were there in July. North Atlantic, ice cold.
Yeah.
So people don't realize a lot of times that there's beach and there's ocean or sea there, but
Right.
it's pretty chilly once you start to get a little bit further north.
Exactly. You really have to go down to Santa Cruz, which is almost even far down enough to where you'd call it the central part of the state. It's a bit maybe an hour to 2 hours south of San Francisco.
Yeah, because we went to Santa Cruz when I visited my brother, and it's even south of San Francisco to get to Santa Cruz.
But it's really only at that point, can you get far south enough to where it's warm enough to actually swim in the water, and that's probably like a good. Like a solid 5-hour drive from Reading or something. So again, this is why I was never into surfing. But
life was good in Reading. You had happy childhood.
I did. A lot of people give it kind of a bad rap, because again, it's different from the rest of the state. It's kind of poor up there. It's not very diverse either. It's extremely white. There has been a meth problem for a while. But again, it has its positive sides too.
All right.
I guess there's kind of a meth or a drug problem everywhere now. So
it's fairly universal.
I probably shouldn't be laughing about that, but it's
fairly a universal problem. But at any rate,
right.
a part of the state that a lot of people wouldn't know about California.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And is somewhat contrary, as you pointed out, to some of the Californian stereotypes.
100%. Like people are into. There's a big rodeo every year. That's one of the things to do in town. A classic car show. We have an amazing fireworks show that's put on by this private foundation there. It's one of the best I've ever seen. Easily. It's absolutely one of the best in the state. You know? So those are like the things to do. Yeah, cool April Nights car show, classic car show. Enthusiasts come from all over, even from out of state to participate.
There you go. So a little tourism message for people that want to visit Reading.
Really, absolutely. If you're into nature, it's a wonderful place.
Well, as I said, I think most people have heard of Mount Shasta at the very least, and it's the same area.
The town itself, I think this is why a lot of people, until maybe the last 20 years, when we put in the Sundial Bridge, didn't really know about Reading, or it was like, oh, if I found someone that knew about it, they were like, oh, I passed through there once on the way to Oregon. It's kind of like the first city as you're coming south from Oregon and California. Sure. Small city, a little less than 100,000 people now. But yeah, most of the time people would be like, I stopped there for gas once. It was hot. That was it.
That was it.
But the Sundial Bridge they put in 2004, this has actually drawn a lot of people to the town. Now when I ask people about Reading, most people have heard about it. Even people from out of the state or whatever. Like, okay, we've been there. It's a unique bridge built by Santiago Calatrava, this Spanish architect. There's only one other kind like it in the world. Seasonally, it is actually a working sundial. It looks like a massive sundial. Beautiful bridge over the Sacramento River with a glass bottom. It's very cool. It's the first place that I'd ever seen in Reading. The first time that I ever noticed people speaking different languages there.
All right, there you go. So
attracting international tourists now.
A point of interest in tourism in the area.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So check out Reading. Of course, like in I guess most most parts of the states, you'll find some very crazy people, but also some really genuinely nice people as well.
Sure. As we said, sort of typical middle class or working class America.
The crime rate was fairly low growing up. We never felt like it was a dangerous place. Again, like solid place to grow up. I had a very nice childhood.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to, because this channel is about expat adventures. And of course, you're in Prague. I'm in Prague. We met here in Prague. We've been friends for many years. But this isn't your first expat experience. When you were a student at university, you had. So maybe we'll start with that expat experience when you were still at university, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
That's right. So I went to, this is funny. In Europe, I've gotten accustomed to saying, when I was at uni, when I was matriculating at uni, but no. In the U.S., we say in college, right? So I went to college or university, whatever you want to say, in San Diego. It's San Diego State, which has always had a rep for being a huge party school, like huge fraternity, sorority life.
It's one of those things. It's like San Diego or Chico State. Like these are places and definitely have a reputation for just being party.
Totally, and my mom graduated from Chico State. But the funny thing is, these are actually considered two of the best and the most competitive state universities.
Best in what sense?
Out of that, well, they have the lowest acceptance rate, like the highest incoming GPA for their students. There are 23 or 24 state universities, and these are both considered two of the best ones.
Okay.
So I was in the international business program, which is the top-rated bachelor program in the school. It's the only kind that's actually ranked, the only major that's ranked in the top 10 nationally, according to out of international business programs in U.S. News and World Report. That's kind of what they're famous for, and they have the second best. It was at the time. I assume it's still first or second best now, but it was the second best study abroad program in the whole country.
Okay, and where did you go?
To Spain. We could go, we had the option to go anywhere. The major was business classes, language classes, and like regional/cultural classes. You had a language focus. Mine was Spanish. So whatever your language was, you had to. It was a requirement to go for an internship abroad or at least one semester abroad to a country that speaks your language, your language focus. So I actually could have gone anywhere in, Latin America, Central, South, whatever.
So did you minor
Mexico.
in Spanish?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I chose to go to Spain because I was like, this is cool. I've never been to Europe.
Sure.
So let's go check it out. So yeah, I studied there. Yeah.
And where exactly were you in Spain?
In Valladolid. So I chose to go to. I also could have gone to some of the other major cities. I could have gone to Barcelona, Madrid, for example.
I think most people probably would have chose Madrid or Barcelona. So why did you choose? How is it, Valladolid?
Yeah, because I wanted to work on my Spanish for one. I'd known some kids that went there to Madrid or Barcelona. Well, Barcelona, firstly, most of the time the classes were in Catalan.
Really?
Not the
Even for
Castellano.
international program,
Yes.
the classes are still in Catalan.
Yes.
The local dialect and not in Castilian Spanish.
Sure. So that's kind of a deal breaker for a lot of.
Well,
students
understandably
that's going there.
slow. Like, with all due respect, and this is one of the problems with Europe, is it seems like every region has their own language or dialect.
Right.
And so if you're an international student coming from America or Canada, I can't imagine that you'd want to go and take classes. Well, first of all, you wouldn't be prepared. And who would want to take, Barcelona, but who would want to take classes in Catalan?
Spain is exactly what you just described, but to the extreme. Like, these different little dialects. I mean, in Spain, they're not even really different dialects. They're pretty much entirely different languages. Like, again, I can speak and understand Spanish fairly well, but I can hardly understand Catalan at all. So
it's something between French and Spanish.
Yeah.
Something
but still,
like that.
But still
it's a little bit weird. But, But there's a lot of these different Latin languages or dialects, however you want to call them, that are still in existence in different regions. It's true for Italy as well. Even in Portugal, in I think Mid-Andes in the north is a different dialect of Portuguese. So these, of course, exist, which is fine.
Right.
But for an international program with international students,
I know,
and have to come and sit through a lecture in Catalan, I'm sorry, it's a little bit ridiculous.
I know. Yeah, totally. So, since then I have visited Barcelona, a great city to visit, but that was kind of not an option to study there. In Madrid, I'm glad I made the decision to go to Valladolid. It's
well, I think most people probably have never even heard of this city in
100%.
Spain.
Yeah.
You found the Reading of Spain.
Yeah, more or less. I did. Yeah, exactly. Another like super conservative place.
Yeah.
Which is not. I don't. It's not like I see.
And
this
away
out,
from the coast.
I'm not even conservative. That's the thing. Yeah. So like everywhere I guess somehow everywhere I've gone, I've been a little out of place in my life.
And how far is Valladolid? Because it also is not on the coast.
No. But it's another one of the, I guess you're right. Also kind of like Reading.
The Reading of Spain.
The city itself not super interesting. There's a really nice park. There is actually some interesting history there, but the city itself is just kind of so-so. A lot of the locals there don't like tourists so much, but the nature around it, and there's some really historical cities. Really awesome ones around it. It's in the wine region. It's inland, kind of like it's.
What's the name of the region?
Northwest, Castilla y León.
Okay.
It's about a 2.5-hour car ride northwest of Madrid. You can take the high-speed train and you can get there in 1 hour flat.
So it should be the heart of Castilian Spain then.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a decent size. It's not like a small town or anything. Mid-sized city, I guess you could say, almost like big city. About 350,000 people. But yeah, again, it's not super touristic, possibly in part because the locals, you'll literally see signs everywhere where it's like, turistas, or no turistas, or like,
Like there's an anti-tourism movement there or something? They don't want tourists in Valladolid?
I'm thinking they're trying to change that now, because maybe they finally realized like this could stimulate our economy a bit. But yeah, it's super. I've had multiple Spanish people tell me like this is probably the most Spanish city in all of Spain. Again, super conservative, super traditional. The Castilian Spanish came from there. You know,
it is the dialect of modern Spanish.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So it came right from there. You know, from
linguistically, if that's what you wanted, you went right to the heart of it.
Yep. And you know, in Madrid, honestly. Again, I'm glad I made the decision to go there. Not only because I can work on my Spanish, like Madrid's a big city. All the Americans I knew that went there, they only hung out with other Americans, and they pretty much only spoke English. And I'm like, well, why did you even go then? What was the point? You know, they didn't try to soak up any of the culture or anything. I wanted all that. You know, I wanted like kind of the more experience.
And so do you have any stories you can share? Any experiences that you had there on your semester abroad about interacting with the locals? How were they with international students being in their city?
Most of the locals were fine. Some of them, not so welcoming or accommodating, but most of them were okay.
Did you have any negative experiences?
Well, yeah. I mean, just some people were just I don't know a bit rude. You know, like the way they're I don't know, maybe it's just a Spanish thing, maybe more of a cultural thing. You know, they can be. For I don't think they're really trying to be, but a lot of them, for us, you know, for, I don't know, American or Canadian standards, they might seem a bit short or rude in your interactions with them, you know. They
how were they with you as a foreigner trying to speak their language and perhaps making mistakes as you do as a language learner or accent? How were they with you attempting to speak with them in their language?
Again, it varied. Most of them appreciated it, but there are also a lot of people there who, like, it's a bit smart-ass sometimes. Like, you'll say a word and you might not pronounce it exactly correctly, and they'll sort of pretend like they didn't understand what you said. You know?
Yeah. Well, like, that's almost like a joke. You said the word and as close as you can, pretty damn close, and they're like, no, it's this, and they repeat it, and I'm like, you're thinking like, that is what I said.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. They knew what I was trying to say, but it's kind of like, huh? Oh, you mean this? Yeah. It's like, yeah.
Any stories to share there with shops or restaurants? I don't know, dealing with wait staff. There's plenty of stories, as you know, about wait staff.
Customer service
here in Czech Republic. But tell us about Valladolid.
I really liked it. There are bars and cafes everywhere, and that's actually pretty cool because the people dress nicely when they go out in public. Mm-hmm. You know, like even when my parents came for a visit, they noticed right away. They're like, we can't believe there's so many cafes, pubs, restaurants. And you know that they can actually stay open, that they can actually stay in business, you know, because they're just everywhere. But that's what they do. You know, the people are very much, you know, instead of the U.S. where we have this very sedentary lifestyle. You know, people, you know, they don't just drive everywhere; they usually walk, and they love going out. You know,
Spanish culture in general, they love going out, they love socializing, they love talking. Yeah. Like they can talk forever. So like a 3 or 4 hour dinner is not unusual.
No,
not at all.
And these people, I mean, they stay out late. Like everything is later, you know.
That's another part of their, like 6 p.m. is still the afternoon for
hasta
them.
Mañana, hasta luego, you know, sort of.
So for them, having dinner at 10 is not unusual.
And it's, really, they stay out very late. Even the elderly people, I'd see them coming home, like, you know, at the crack of dawn sometimes, you know. Mm-hmm. So the international student community, there's a really good one there at Valladolid. You know, people, you're going out and just partying all the time, you know, in your early 20s. And again, even sometimes when I was coming home, I'm like, man, it's late. And I'd look and I'd see like a little old lady, you know, and her husband slowly coming out of the bar. Like,
coming home at 4 a.m.
Totally. Everything's later there. You know, they don't eat until like 9, 10 p.m., you know, which would be crazy for most people. So, let's see what else. I lived with. This was interesting. I had my roommates were.
Was it student housing? Was it some sort of dormitory or other arrangement?
No, but you could go to the university and they would help you like find an apartment, or people who are looking for a roommate, could like post something there. And
But you weren't necessarily like living with a Spanish family.
Nope.
You weren't billeted to a family.
That was my second trip there 2 years later when I went for an internship with this program. I did live with a family there in Sevilla.
Okay.
Yeah, which is very different, but beautiful city. I like Sevilla better than any of the Spanish major cities, for sure. I even like it better than Barcelona. It's very, like, classically Spanish.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. Like, so much history there, amazing architecture, Gothic architecture. They've got one of the biggest cathedrals, the third biggest cathedral in the world, after the one in the Vatican and in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah. Well, actually, Milan's Duomo has to be up there as well.
It is.
Yeah.
That's next. That's the fourth biggest. But the one in
It's
Sevilla
the fourth biggest?
The one in
Okay,
Sevilla
I thought it was higher up on the list.
I believe so. Yeah, but the one in Sevilla is even bigger than that. And yeah, a lot of beautiful Gothic and other architecture. They've got this ancient gladiator arena that you can visit just outside the city.
Is it actually from Roman times though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, very, very, very beautiful area. Andalusia is just incredible. It's beautiful. Sevilla's not quite on the coast, maybe an hour and a half drive away. But beautiful coastline. Granada is not far from there, which is fantastic as well. If you've heard of that.
Yeah, sadly, I have not visited anywhere in Spain as of yet, which is ridiculous. But I haven't been anywhere
definitely go
in Spain, which is crazy because I have wanted to visit both Barcelona and Madrid at the very least. And I planned a trip to Madrid, but it fell through.
Yeah.
So even though years on the continent, I've still been nowhere in Spain, which is a terrible pity because, of course, I've heard how lovely all these places are. What about we haven't talked about the food. What's typical food like Valladolid versus Sevilla?
I did want to say real quick before we get to that, because of course, the food culture there is amazing, right? In Spain.
That's another Spanish thing is food.
But I lived with, and this was very interesting. I got to meet people from all over the world, which again was totally different than living in the States, where it's just American people everywhere you go. You could fly on a plane for hours, and everybody's still more or less the same. I had a German roommate, an Italian, and a Lithuanian. Yeah.
Okay.
It almost sounds like the setup to a joke or something, right? A German, an American, an Italian, and a Lithuanian
and walk into a bar.
So that was interesting, and I got to meet all sorts of really, really cool people. Again, although, like I said, Valladolid is extremely conservative, traditional, the local people are kind of so-so when it comes to tourists, but are on the fence, I guess you could say. Big university, really good university, one of the oldest in Europe, and people from all over the world, students from really all over the world. Yeah, okay. So that was awesome. We traveled to see some very beautiful places there, like around there's Salamanca, if you've heard of that.
Of course.
Segovia with these ancient Roman aqueducts. So there are some fairly famous, other cities and whatnot in the region too.
Well, I mean, there's places in Europe, like countries like Spain, you could spend, I'm sure, weeks just traveling around finding answers. And the same for Italy.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I have had a few trips to Italy, Milan, Rome, Venice, and these countries are so amazing that you could spend weeks just traveling around.
In Spain,
it's so amazing. The history, the architecture, the food culture, it's amazing.
100%, and we took, I took a couple different road trips when I was there. One, we went to all these hot spots. My roommates and I, we rented a car and went to all these hot spots in the region. We went to in the same region where Valladolid is, there's the oldest church in Spain, and we stopped at one along the way, and I thought it was it, because they said, "Oh, this is from the 1100s." I was like, "Oh, yeah, cool, that's pretty old," And they're like, "This isn't the church yet, Clay." And I'm like, "Oh, all right, like the 1100s, that's not old,
That's not
It's like, come on, kind of laughing at me. So the oldest one was from, I guess you'd call it the Dark Ages. It was this tiny little church that's still intact from the year 660, I want to say.
Really?
Pretty old, yeah.
A 7th century church?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, right.
So like you said, incredible history, architecture,
It's
food,
just things.
weather. Spain has it all.
Yeah, like because we're from not only like North America, but from the West.
Yeah.
I'm from Alberta in Canada. You're from California.
Yeah.
Anything that's more than 100 years old is old.
Yeah.
In Europe,
I know.
100 years, it's nothing.
People
That's
scoff
yesterday.
at that, yeah.
So needs to be like centuries old,
Yeah.
or even in some cases like a millennium.
I know.
Before it gets interesting around because there's so much old stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the food, yeah, it's fantastic. I love it. I probably like Spanish food the best.
And what can you tell us beyond? Because of course everyone knows the Spanish people love seafood, red wine, tapas.
Yeah.
Is there something that you tried?
Cured meats like prosciutto. And
Like we
melon,
know,
and
is
I
there
love it, yeah.
something that would be a surprise to us that you had, whether it's Valladolid or Sevilla or somewhere else, that people wouldn't expect in Spanish cuisine?
Blood sausage is big there.
Yeah, it seems blood sausage is popular everywhere in Europe.
Right. It's actually somewhat popular here as well. But
Same when I
really
went to
like that.
Budapest, same thing. Local menu, the guy's like, "Oh, you got to try the blood sausage." I'm like, "What is the deal with the blood sausage?"
Right. Because
Maybe this is connected to why there's so many vampire myths in Europe because they
Right.
love blood sausage, and actually in Czech Republic they also do the blood soup. When
Right.
they're slaughtering the pig, zabiechka,
Right.
they'll make the fresh blood soup. So nothing goes to waste.
No.
So blood sausage. Anything else that would surprise us about Spanish cuisine?
I mean, I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of weird stuff other than that. None that really comes to mind. Off the top of my head.
Did you like the seafood? Because the Spain, they're all about the
yeah.
sea.
Sure, of course. Paella is great. They have a lot of fish. They use a lot of olive oil. It's not so much like when you go to a restaurant, you don't really see butter with the bread like we have.
No, it's
in
more
the US.
natural for them to use olive oil, which
Totally.
makes sense.
They use it and everything, and it's great. And their diet is healthy. I mean, the food, besides being delicious, it's very healthy.
Yeah.
You very rarely see any very overweight people there.
Yeah.
It's great. Everything, from the seafood, the cured meats, these special potatoes. They call them patatas bravas. These green peppers. The cooked ones with chunks of sea salt.
I think this is what we misunderstand about, because they talk about the Mediterranean diet being
Yes.
a healthy diet.
Right.
But it's more than just the diet. It's a whole culture. It's a whole lifestyle.
Yeah.
They take their time. They're not in a hurry. They eat
Right.
healthy food.
They don't just wolf it down.
They take their time. They digest their meals. They drink their red wine every day. And they socialize
Right.
a lot, which also people don't realize
Right.
is a component of health.
That's,
Is they're very social.
What a surprise. Yeah. That's
So
good for your
it's
health.
like
it all ties
all
in.
of these things contribute to health and longevity.
Right.
So obviously this is why Italy, Spain, these cultures, they're very healthy and they live to good average lifespan, and not only the amount of time but generally in good health.
Yes. Definitely. I mean, it's everything. The food, the wine, the coffee.
Yeah.
Much better than in North America. There, like when my parents first came, immediately they tried one sip of the coffee, and they're like, "This is the best we've ever had."
Yeah.
It's not like you're just American drip style.
And even
filtered
I'm not
coffee.
a wine drinker, but even actually between, if it's cheap Italian wine and cheap Spanish wine, I'll take the cheap Spanish wine. Because even cheap Spanish wine, still pretty good.
It's
still it's a solid drinkable wine, and I'm not a wine drinker, but once again, it's quality.
Rioja is the only, I guess, like really famous one, and it's very good. But this is the one that most people, outside of Spain really know about, and they think, well, that's all they really have. But no, pretty much all of the wine that I had there was solid.
It's very drinkable, even the cheap stuff.
And it's very reasonably priced as well. So that helps too when you're going out. Like even relative to a Spanish salary, which is not like an American one. It's affordable.
Their salaries are relatively low, so the food has to be affordable.
So, but even for them, it's pretty affordable. Going out to
Yeah.
restaurants and cafes and whatnot. So hence part of the reason why they do it.
All right. So we're doing another tourism. This isn't sponsored, but another tourism message this time for Spain.
Yes.
But let's
absolutely.
move on. So it looks like you studied Spanish. It was your minor at university. You did both a semester abroad and an internship
Right.
in Spain.
Yeah.
What are you doing in Czech Republic?
Right. So then finally, when that was over and I graduated in 2010, I moved back to Reading, to my hometown, where unfortunately the job market is not so great.
Well, yeah, you already mentioned
yeah.
there's not so many
yeah.
options.
Yeah, it's
not
a bit,
so many options.
It's a bit depressing. Like again, you're not, if you have a degree, you can't really put it to use there.
It's really of no benefit.
If you want to go work at a restaurant, retail clothing stores, service industry, those are kind of your only options. And there's it's either that or okay, if you want to be like a doctor or lawyer or something, there's not much in between. And to get a really good job there, you probably have to know someone most of the time. So it's kind of like, I did have a job in insurance there with farmers for a bit. Didn't really like what I saw. You can see that there's a lot of, let's say, I don't know, deceptive practices in the insurance industry, as you would probably imagine.
Are we? This is an expose into unethical insurance, is it? Or
yeah, and
or you just saw some practices there, maybe a little bit on the dodgy side.
Right. And I also had there's a district manager, I guess he was at one point, who they later asked him to leave because they found out he was selling people policies that he knew that they couldn't afford. Because
is that anything like giving people mortgages that they couldn't afford?
Right.
Yes. We've heard this story before.
But it didn't matter because he knew, like, when he got the sale, it would basically be like it would still count. Like
he just wants to
towards
get the
his record.
commission. Yeah.
Exactly. And
just get the commission.
Right. He would get the commission, and it would help him advance in his career. And they eventually figured out what he was doing, and they let him go. But this guy also misled me into thinking that I would be getting a base salary just after I got certified and passed the test, that it wouldn't just be a commission. And then the other district manager I spoke with in Reading, she's like, yeah, that's not true. I'm sorry that he misled you. And by the way, we're kind of asking him to leave. So that sucked. And
all right, so no insurance career for you?
No. I had already put in months into studying for the test and all these trips to Sacramento to take it and paying for it on my own. And I still hadn't made any money, like a half year in, and I'm like, I forget this, I'm done. So at that point, it was like I was back to square one. I'd also just recently broken up with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and again, it's like I'm living. I was in my mid-20s and living with my parents with no girlfriend and no job. So it's like I've got to do something here. I felt things were just stagnant, and I'm like, well, I loved it in Europe. Why don't I try to go back? I knew when I was in Spain, I knew some people there, some Americans or British people who were teaching English as a foreign language. So I thought that could definitely be my way to get I'm sure I could do that. That would be a good way to get my foot in the door, so to speak. Sure,
logical.
And again, I liked the European lifestyle, let's say, where it's not just all about your job,
it's the more of a balanced, and we've lost this in North America and the culture. It's too much about work and not enough about having a balance between the rest of your life and your work life. So in Europe, it's better balanced in general.
Right, and you feel like you're almost kind of shunned in the U.S. if you don't just work or slave away all the time.
There's almost a moral kind of thing, like it's wrong. I don't know if this is maybe Protestant work ethic or something in our psyche, like there's something noble in labor, so you must always be laboring or doing something.
And it's like you've got to work for it. You've got to earn it, and it's like, okay, that's fine. But even with things like health insurance or higher education in the U.S., which are basically considered human rights here in Europe. Like everybody should be able to have those, to have access to those things and be able to afford them. And that's strangely not the case in the U.S. when every other advanced, or Western country has already been doing this for decades now. But again, it's like, well, if you're poor, then maybe go get
Sucks
another job.
to be you.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
sucks to be. You don't have
Yeah.
health insurance. Sucks to be
try
you.
not being
Yeah,
poor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of the attitude. You know,
Yeah.
we've got 10% of the Americans with no.
Yeah.
With no health insurance, and well, you know, yeah, they go get a job. You
Yeah.
know? you bum, so,
Yeah.
sort of thing. But I like that here, and again, then Americans have this sort of lazy stereotype of Europeans, and I don't think that that's the case at all. It's like you said, there's just more of a balance to things here.
Yeah,
Right?
just that there should be a balance. Yes, people, and that's the other thing. I think a lot of people in North America think that once you're in Europe, living a European way of life, that you're on a permanent holiday or something.
I know.
I got
Right.
that from a family member, and I'm like, I work full
Just over
time.
there lounging around. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you think I pay the rent and bills?
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
like, how do you think I've been living for the last, 3 years?
Right. Yeah.
I came over with a little money in the bank, but a little. Like,
Right.
how cheap do you think it is to live in Prague?
I know.
You really think I've been on a holiday for the last 3 years? Like, I worked full time.
I know. Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't have a regular contract. As you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
with a lot of English teachers,
This-
you're a freelancer.
Mhm.
So you eat what you kill.
Oh yeah.
So if
You
if
have
you're
to-
not
have
if
to
you're
work.
not teaching, you get no money.
Yep.
You have to pay for your own health insurance, and you have no paid holidays.
Yes.
So if you
Right.
want to make money, you
Yeah,
work.
Exactly.
So this idea, but they have a Facebook idea. They see where on a weekend maybe you travel to a castle,
Right.
you post a photo on Facebook, and they think
Yeah.
that's your life every
Right.
day. And
Exactly.
it's like, no,
Right.
that's like maybe 3% of my time is that.
I know.
The
yeah.
rest of the time,
drinking
I'm
a nice Czech
yeah.
beer, a nice little Spanish glass of wine, and it's
Yeah.
this laissez-faire
Yeah.
lifestyle. they're
It's
leading
like
over
the
there,
rest
and
of the
it's-
time I'm hustling like everybody else. And I'm even doing more because I'm not a citizen. I don't have a right to these things.
Right.
I have to sort of justify my being here.
I know.
So,
I know. Now,
yeah.
Okay. Yes. Do we get longer? Okay. Outside of maybe if you're an independent contractor or working as like a private language teacher, which you and I both started out doing.
Yeah.
When you do get employed here with an office or business or whatever, you do. Most places now offer 5 weeks of paid vacation.
Yeah. Well, this is something
which
that
is
would
great.
would blow
But-
because
yeah.
in
But
Canada
for Americans, they
and,
think that's insane,
and
yeah.
Americans, it's like you start with 2 weeks of paid holiday. And you don't go, I think, to 3 weeks until after maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
The same job. Here, yeah, you start. The law is 4 weeks.
Right.
And
Minimum-
a lot of
it's an
minimum
the EU
4
minimum.
weeks
Yeah.
paid.
Right.
And a lot of companies and corporations will give you a little sweetener and offer you 5 weeks.
Yes.
25 paid days.
Most are doing that now. I think, especially like post-COVID. You know, it seems like they're having to offer more
Yeah.
benefits to their
But
candidates.
they could do this in Canada. They could do this in America. They
I know.
could. They
Right.
could give people more paid holidays, and they should.
They should, and Americans think it's they think it's lazy or weird, that we have so much paid time off, and it's like, well, no, actually, you're the weird ones.
Yeah.
Like everybody else outside of the U.S. is like, what? Like people don't even believe it when I tell them that. They're like, are you serious? A lot of people there only have 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And then they're like, then they kind of understand. They're like, oh, this is why most Americans don't have a passport, or
Yeah.
never really travel abroad. Or
They don't have time for it.
they don't.
Or the
no.
money in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Right, 2 weeks. I mean, okay, maybe if you use, you're probably going to use, close to a week for that. You could, let's say, for Christmas time. That leaves, maybe 1 week for the rest of the year. So
Yeah.
you can't travel all the way to
Yeah,
Europe
2 weeks is
in just 1 week.
2 weeks is nothing. 2 weeks a year is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, but I'm going to steer you back on track. So, how is it that you didn't end up teaching English in Spain then, and you ended up here? We need to find out how you got here, man.
Yes. Right. I didn't necessarily want to go to Spain. It's not like I didn't like it. The job market there as well, again, much like back in Shasta County, not so great, So it was like, okay, if I can find a good language program there, maybe. But the one that I found that had about as good reviews or better than any that I can find online happened to be here in Prague.
Uh-huh. And just to clarify, so our viewers understand,
Yeah.
this is a course
Yeah.
for people who want to teach English as a second language.
TEFL certification.
Yeah, you get a certificate because it's for
Cool.
people like us who have university degrees, but our education is not as teachers, as a profession. So there are these schools that will teach you, it's a 4-week intensive program to learn how to teach English as a second language. And when you're finished, you get a certificate. Just so it's, so you were investigating these these TEFL schools.
Right.
Yes.
And so I found a very highly rated one here in Prague, and
Which one was it again? I've forgotten.
the Language House.
You went to
And-
Language
and
House. Yeah, I
it's
checked out the Language
Oxford
House.
for
Yeah.
you, right?
Well, actually, I was going to do Language House as well, but they were full. And another good one was Oxford House, so I went with Oxford House instead.
Yes, yeah, sure. That has a good reputation as well. Yeah, so that piqued my interest when I saw that there was such a highly rated program here.
Because of Language House, really.
And because one of my best friends, I'm still in touch with today, he's coincidentally moved to Europe in the last few years too, which is funny. But he studied abroad the same year I did in 2008 when I studied in Spain. He studied abroad for a semester here in Prague, and he loved it.
Oh,
And
okay. So while you were in Spain, he was in Prague for his semester abroad.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So
And I imagine he had a lot of good stories to tell you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Yeah, lots of fun parties here. Like I had in Spain. Lots of good travels and meeting new friends, and and he just said great things about the city. Okay. Besides the fact that it's historic, it's beautiful. He said the beer's pretty good.
Well, yeah, that's what everybody knows. Good, cheap Czech beer.
The girls are really pretty, so I was like, stop right there. I'm already sold. So, yeah.
And you and I actually came to Prague, I think, was it a month apart? Very
Right.
close
Yep.
in the timing that we came here.
So, yeah, I guess you came a month after me in October 2012.
Yeah.
I had the September course
Yeah.
with the Language House.
Yeah.
Right? It's almost been 12 years now. Funny, huh?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I wanted to do September at the Language House, but they were already full.
Right.
That's why I went to Oxford House in October.
Right. Okay.
So we
yeah.
were very nearly. If I had maybe tried to get into the group a little bit sooner, we could have been actually in the same group at the Language House because I had contacted them and everything.
Yeah.
And they said, no, we're full. We're full.
Right. So then I was like, okay, this sounds great. I'll come, maybe for at least a year or so, and do some traveling and do some teaching. I wanted to kind of get my career started as well.
Yeah.
Maybe meet up with some old friends, make some new ones.
And I think you and I actually met at a house party, I think, that was at Dana's place.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because in my TEFL group, the interesting thing about my TEFL group, there was 12 of us, and 2 Brits, 5 Canadians, which I don't think I know. Since then, I don't think I've met 5 Canadian, maybe maximum 5 Canadian English teachers. There are 5 Canadians in my group.
Yeah.
And 5 Americans. So
Right.
we immediately started to just hang out. And Dana, who was in my group, also one of the Canadians in my TEFL group. You met Dana through, I think, one of the language schools, and she
Because we were
invited
working-
you to a house party.
The first language school I worked at, Threshold.
Threshold, yeah,
That's
that
where I
was
met Dana. I think we went to a training session there or something like
Yeah,
that.
for new teachers, maybe.
Got to talking,
Yeah.
and she said, she had this group of friends, and
Yeah.
why don't you come hang out with us one of these times? And was it the Christmas one? Or was it?
I think it was even
that?
before Christmas.
Right.
It was a house party before Christmas because
Yeah.
there was a flat where like 3 of the Canadians were living. Dana and Annie and Mike,
Yeah.
I think, all lived in that flat.
Right.
And
Right.
maybe there might have been a 4th person, but at least
Yeah.
like 3 of the Canadians were there.
Yeah.
And they had a big flat. Most of us had small places, so they used to
Yeah.
have house parties a lot.
Trinity, if you remember her, she was also friends at one point with my wife. So, which is okay. Which leads us to my next point. Because I told you I was initially only thinking about coming here for maybe like a year or 2. And lo and behold, it's been almost 12 now.
Mm-hmm.
And besides the fact that I fell in love with the city, I also fell in love with someone who's now my wife. Yeah.
Yes. Who was your student at the time, but she was an adult student.
Right.
We'll just make that
Yeah.
clear so there's no confusion. She was one of your
Thank you.
students,
I
but
appreciate that,
an
Jeff. Yeah.
already an adult
Well, yeah,
student.
yeah,
not-
exactly. People
yeah.
kind of, they think that's funny, right? When I
Yeah.
tell them that, it's like
Yeah.
don't get the wrong idea.
Yeah, there's
no
no Lolita here. She
No,
was an
it's
adult.
completely
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
I was going to teach at her, and we didn't work for the same company either or anything like that. So I guess I was going to teach, like you do with the private language schools. They send you around to various offices.
Yeah.
It's usually the nice businesses, the corporations, the offices that pay for English lessons for their employees.
Yeah. A lot of people probably, once again, don't know that actually a lot of your lessons, especially when you're a freelancer at these private language schools, is you're going to offices, you're going to companies.
It's
and
not at a school.
It's not at a school, so these are not teenagers. These are normal companies
Older,
that just want, these people are adults and they have like maybe an hour a week where they're trying to improve their English. So you come to the course and you come to the company and teach a small group of these colleagues at the same company. You teach them a bit of English so they can improve their English because it's some international firm usually.
Absolutely. So I had a few small group classes there at her company, 3 or 4 of them. Most of them had at least a few, maybe upwards of 3, 4, 5 people in them. And then I had a private lesson or an individual, a one-to-one lesson, you call it. With her. That's another thing that people like. My great uncle, when we went to visit him a few years ago in Idaho during one of my trips home, my dad and I took a road trip from California to Idaho to visit with him. So that was his, I said, I met her, I was offering her private lessons, and he was like, oh, private lessons.
Private lessons, wink, wink.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even he kind of gave me a little ribbing on that one.
Nudge,
yeah.
Private lessons. But yes, I suppose for a lot of people, they don't understand how it works as an English teacher, especially when you're a freelancer.
Yeah.
You're getting lessons from different places. So you're doing company courses through private language schools.
Yeah.
You're trying to find your own private students where it's a one-to-one session, and maybe you're just meeting this person in a cafe for an hour.
Right.
So you're actually getting students and lessons from a lot of different places.
Yeah, exactly. There's lessons you have with your language school, who will try to find lessons for you.
Yeah.
They take a cut of it as well. So
sure.
It's more expensive for the students or the office paying for it, and it's actually a little bit less money for you than if you were to just cut out the middleman and just organize your own private lessons, which I eventually did. I eventually got enough private lessons where I really didn't even need my language school.
You had it at that level?
I had that many. I probably could have had like 15 to 20 private lessons a week had I wanted to. I had really like very few towards the end with my actual language schools.
Really? I always had a mix. I always had a mix because for before I went to like a regular Czech school with a regular contract, when I was still a freelancer, I always had those pomataritni, the intensive classes, 3 hours every day as my base that I taught at the language schools.
Right.
And then I would fill in the rest of the day with either company courses or private students or the exam prep courses, which I really didn't enjoy teaching. But once again, you need to get the lessons. So a lot of them is exam prep. They have to take an English exam for their level. And so you have to teach them a bit of preparation for the exam. So
exactly. There can be a lot of things involved. It can be more of just what they call just a conversation course. Where you just speak with the student. You come up with conversation topics. You just try to talk to them as much as possible. You correct a little of their grammar mistakes every now and then. Then there are other lessons that, in language schools where it's more structured, right? Where
you're working out of a course book.
You might have to teach from a textbook. You might actually have to help some of them pass some sort of an official test or exam, either for that they need for their school or even for their work. I had a number of students who needed to pass like a certain level.
Yeah, their employer wants them to have a certain level of English.
Level up, and it can even get them, they can get like a higher salary as a result, So it was something that was very important to them, and and it was pretty gratifying, when you'd help them pass the test or something, and they'd come back and say thanks so much,
Absolutely,
I really appreciate it, you really helped me out, and Yeah. So
yeah, I certainly taught plenty of exam prep courses, but I would basically follow what was in whatever the course book was.
And then the private lessons, ones that I just I did some advertising on. I did put around a few flyers. Even got one or two students like that in various parts of the city. But
with your phone number on it, just tear it off.
Exactly.
Call Clay for English.
Right.
American English.
Yeah.
California surfer. Hang
pretty
loose.
much. Yeah.
English. Yeah.
Well, in fact, this is how I even attracted one of my first students. Probably the first one actually. Where it was this young guy and his friend, elementary school age kids. Most of the students I ended up getting were through this post that I made on, or this profile that I created on Teacher Creature. That's what it was called.
Yeah, Teacher Creature.
Teacher Creature.
It's an online thing.
Yeah. Exactly. You put your profile out there. Hey, you're interested in lessons from a a TEFL certified, a native speaker. Being a native speaker really helps too.
There's still a demand here in Central Europe for native speakers.
Right.
So but I mean, that's our whole raison d'etre for being here. They wouldn't give us visas if they didn't need native English speakers.
Right. Absolutely. Again, it gives you a huge advantage for teaching English. We know, like our friend Lubos, he's a phenomenal second language speaker of English, to the point where he almost sounds native, but still they usually give the priority to the native speakers.
Well, that's true. Just to be fair, and a lot of people probably, once again, don't know this, there's a lot of teachers of English of a second language who English is not their first language.
Absolutely.
So, of course, we've had Czech and Slovak colleagues. I've had Polish colleagues where the level of English is very, very good.
Yeah.
And near native, some of them.
Yeah.
And some of them, in some cases, haven't even visited America or England, let alone lived there. So some of them, their knowledge and ability is impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To be sure.
Absolutely.
But I want to, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
So, because we talked so much about Spain, what were your first impressions of Czech Republic when you came here? Because I think it's fair to say it's quite a different culture, certainly a different language.
Yeah.
What were your impressions of Czech Republic when you first arrived?
Yeah, I mean, most places you go in Europe, like, after going to Spain, it wasn't that much of a shock when I came here, because there are certainly some similarities, but in terms of any, like, I don't know if I'd call it a shock. Of course, there are some differences here and some things that you don't expect. I assumed that at first that they, that they ate dinner kind of late. For example, like the Spanish, and that's not the case at all.
No.
It's very early here. In fact, lunch, and this is totally different from the U.S. as well. Lunch here is the main meal.
That's fair to say. Yes.
And it's very common for people to even have like a cooked lunch. Like a warm meal here for lunch. And it does help that almost all of the offices they give a solid 1 hour lunch break. Whereas in the U.S. you might only get 30 minutes, so you got to run down to the store, grab a fast food burger or sandwich, and just eat it as you walk, even maybe, or eat it at your desk or something.
It's true even at the schools actually, because I taught at a gymnasium here in Prague for 5 years, so of course they had cafeteria, and they still have the full thing. You take a soup, a main course, and they usually had maybe a small salad, even if it's just a cucumber salad. And some days there might even be a piece of cake. Right. So there's even like a proper meal with courses even that you take. Absolutely. I mean, you take it all at once, but you're getting like a full proper meal at midday.
And soup is huge here too.
Yeah, they love the soup culture. As a starter, but it has to be warm. It can't be hot. They won't eat hot soup. It has. At least that's my experience. Is they don't like hot soup. It should be like tepid, and they don't eat fresh bread. It needs to be room temperature again. They won't.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. They have a thing. It's a food thing. It's like it can't be too hot. It's not good for your body.
They definitely have certain food rules here. Let's say like you can't be mixing starches and stuff. Like, they thought it was crazy that I like a little like garlic bread on the side with my pasta. They're like, you can't mix that.
No, they don't like to mix starches. I had a student. Who told me, adult, student, so not like, just to give context, an
Yeah.
adult woman,
Yeah.
was like, she's like, Jeff, I saw someone eating a hamburger once,
Right.
which is a sandwich. There's bread.
Yeah.
And they were also eating French fries that are potatoes. And I'm like, yes, and she's like, well, you can't mix. They're
Right.
different starches.
Fries. Yeah.
Bread with potato, you
I
can.
know.
Oh, there's only one. You can only have one starch in the meal. Those are two starches, so
Right.
you can't combine rice and bread or bread and potato. That's too much starch somehow.
Exactly. Exactly. Like when I went out to a
And by the
restaurant-
way,
yeah.
this same woman, she said she had never eaten a hamburger in her life because she couldn't understand.
Right.
Because you have it on a roll with beef, and for her, you have a roll with ham. That's also a Czech thing.
Oh God, yeah, I don't even.
So
get me
they
started,
do
right?
have their food rules, things that you can and cannot combine.
Totally. And there are certain things like when I went out with a group of students, one of my first lessons here at Threshold after our class one day, we went to a restaurant and I asked about this particular side and they're like, well, no, you can't have that with this. And I'm like, what do you mean I can't? You know?
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. It's not a have it your way culture here.
No.
You
Like,
might
no,
ask
like-
for certain substitutions, and the waiter would simply say, no,
Yeah.
you can't have it that way.
100%. And at most of the restaurants, at a lot of them at least, they won't let you order just a side. Like they'll only
Yeah, I've had the
only
same
give
thing.
you the side if you order it with the main course. And I'm like, can I just have like something small, like just a side? Like no. It comes with you got to order it with the.
You have to
meal. Yeah.
order a main course, then you can order a side.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's very besides the soup, which again, like we said, they'll eat all the time. Like when I go out to colleagues, when I go for lunch with colleagues, coworkers, whatever. They'll have a soup pretty much before every meal.
It's
You know,
it's
some
pretty.
of them.
They're pretty standard
all
as
year.
soup is their starter.
Yeah.
It's a standard thing here.
Yeah, and then the other
Warm soup.
Yeah, one of the other weird things is they're very weird. I would say this is not like sandwich culture at all. Like
Well, they love it's open face sandwiches. They're
Right.
There's whole chains where you
Yeah.
can go in and buy all these different types of open
Chlebíčky,
face.
they call them.
Yeah, chlebíčky.
Yeah.
Open face sandwiches. They love open face sandwiches.
Right.
They love that.
And honestly, like sometimes I like them, but a lot of them, honestly, they're not made with the highest quality ingredients.
It's
They're-
usually like sliced boiled egg and ham or salami or some sort of processed meat
right.
or some sort of spread.
Yeah.
That's typical chlebíčky, open
Yeah,
face sandwich.
basic kind
But
of
Czechs
like, yeah.
love them. Any
Love
time of day. Sometimes that is their evening meal. Is they just have chlebíčky. Like that is their deal. They love open face sandwich.
Sometimes, yeah. And most of the time, it's probably like it's like a snack. It's something that they serve at parties. Anytime you go to a party, right? That somebody puts on, they've always got the chlebíčky out.
Yeah,
you know?
but they eat them for lunch. They take them to go because they have these whole
Right.
chains where you can just walk in, order them, stand at a counter, and that's the other thing with Czech fast food. These places where the food, whether it's chlebíčky or a hot meal,
right.
the food is prepared. You just take it. You go to a counter against the wall, and you just stand and eat your meal.
Yeah.
For people, that's Czech fast food.
Yeah.
You're standing, you're eating your food, and then you go.
Yeah, another great contrast, right? Yeah, I first saw that when I went to Spain, and it's very similar here as well, right? They were, again, another shocker for Americans that you could actually eat a meal standing up.
Yeah,
you
you
know,
just
at a
stand and
table.
eat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Little
hot meal and you're
round
cutting
little
with
table right
Northern,
here
you're
and-
just standing there at the
Yeah.
counter eating. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's
yeah,
it.
Yeah. And again, it's very weird. Like, you and I have had this discussion with my wife and multiple other Czechs who all seem to be on the same page, and they're like,
Well, for the record, your wife is Slovak, just so we put that
right,
on.
yeah. But still, it's the same with Czechs and Slovaks, where again, like you're not going to find a good quality like deli sandwich here. It's pretty much non-existent. They don't have the it's hard to find like good quality pastrami or these other deli meats like we have, and people just aren't so into it. Like they actually, I've heard her and a number of other Czechs or Slovaks say, well, it's not food. It's not real food. A sandwich isn't a meal, they say.
Yeah.
So again, they have this weird relationship with sandwiches and burgers as well. They also will insist that this is not a sandwich, even though like when you look it up, the definition of burger. It says it's a type of sandwich.
It is a type of
and they're
sandwich.
like, no, it's not a sandwich. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, okay. And then you just have to let it go at some point.
Yeah.
But they, I don't know. Maybe they're like, for a sandwich for them, it may be more like a classic sort of baguette, sandwich like the French have.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They have weird kind of food rules.
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
All right. I forgot to ask. And so, what level of Spanish do you have?
It's I haven't actually had it tested, but probably somewhere between like B1, B2.
Okay.
Definitely like
between intermediate, upper intermediate.
Exactly.
So you have a decent level of Spanish, but
Yeah.
you didn't come back to Spain. You came to Czech Republic, so I assume no Czech. What's your experience? Because I have to ask with the Czech language.
Probably very similar to yours and most other expats. Like we can, speak at a very basic, conversational level. Like we can do it. Like if you.
Did you ever take a Czech language? Because I even did try to take Czech language course.
At the language house, they offered, like in the very beginning, it was sort of like a survival, language course. We did have a few different classes there, which helped,
No, I actually paid at a Czech language school to learn Czech.
I remember that now that you were doing that. Yeah. That's right.
And I was like, holy hell.
Right.
What is with this grammar?
It's very disheartening or demotivating, I would
It
say,
is.
For most people.
Because usually, like, I studied French in high school, although my French is pretty basic. I lived in Brazil. I still have decent level of Portuguese.
Yeah.
So generally, my language learning experience as a student is generally positive.
Right.
And then I took this Czech language course through Czech language school. It was specifically actually a Czech language school for foreigners. And it was terrible. The book was terrible. The grammar's terrible.
They're obsessed
It
with
was
grammar.
just
obsessed.
Yes, and everything's about grammar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is horrible.
Yeah, and that's so funny. I'm glad you brought that up because then their style of learning, it's so focused on grammar. They do the same when they try to learn English.
Yeah.
When their teachers, try to teach the kids English, they are
all
instead
about
of
grammar.
practicing conversation, which is really how you learn.
Yeah.
Get them to speak with and listen to a native speaker as much as possible. Instead of doing that, it's just grammar. And they literally know more, even like low-level second language English speakers, Czechs here, they know more about grammar, English grammar than we do.
Yes. More than the average person in North America.
And they told us this at the language house when we first started there.
It's true.
It's insane. Like so, we're not focused on that at all in the U.S. Like we know how to properly use these various tenses and whatnot. Grammar and verb tenses, but we don't know. If you asked us what verb tense did you just use, we don't know.
Yeah. Actually, shamefully, we don't teach like in Canada, America. We should teach more English grammar, to be fair, but.
Possibly.
But Czechs are obsessed with grammar because that's how they study Czech, as you said.
Yeah.
But still, a lot of them still end up using Czechisms because they have a Czech brain.
Right.
And so they often use English words, but in a Czech way. And because Czech is a language where you can play with word order.
Yeah.
Whereas English is subject, verb, object, manner, place, time. Like there's a general way to construct the sentence. And so one of my and to be fair, this was a low-level student. He was like pre-intermediate.
Right.
But he made one of these word order mistakes. It was like on a Monday morning, and he was very, very happy in a positive mood. And I'm like, what happened on the weekend? He's like, it was my birthday. A cake made my mother. Is how he said it. But what he meant to say is my mother made a birthday cake.
Yeah.
But with Czech, you can switch the word order. You can start with the object and not the subject. So a cake made my mother.
Right.
Is what he said.
I know.
So fighting with Czech brain is like, oh my God. It's like uphill battle the whole way.
Right.
And you like the lower level students, of course, the higher level students don't make those kind of mistakes, but still like lower level, especially pre-intermediate, they're going to be making these kind of Czechisms where something they put together in a Czech way, you have to tell them like that doesn't work in English.
When they're trying to figure out how to say something, or they're trying to remember the way to say something, you've probably heard this before, that they'll ask how it's called. Or how it is called. It's like, okay, firstly, it's a question, so the subject. Hold on a second. I have to think about this. It's a question. So the verb comes before the subject, right? So it's like, how are you? You know. For them, like you said, it's kind of interchangeable. It doesn't matter, you know.
Technically, they can, because the words themselves change. They can move the word order around, quite a bit. They have a freedom that doesn't exist, so they'll make these word order mistakes all the time, or they'll simply use the wrong words, like ways that we wouldn't phrase things in English. They phrase it, and it sounds weird. So, even more advanced students, instead of saying, "Can I ask you a question?" It's very common. In fact, even higher level students is, "Can I have a question?" They say that all the time. Can I have a
because
question?
It's a direct translation.
Direct translation. Can I have a question, instead of saying, "Can I ask a question?" And they do it all the time. But it's just, once again, it's ordered different in their brain. And so you have to really retrain them. But with the lower ones, it's really hard sometimes, because they mix up the word order, or they use certain words that we wouldn't use.
And they're so
like
used to saying
they ask you something, and like, those are all English words, but I still don't know what you mean.
There's that, and again, you really have to like drill it in. Some of them, they're just so used to saying it like this, and it's so weird for them, you know, like to change the subject and verb order, for example, in a question or a statement. You know, it's such a strange concept to them. You really have to like try to drive that home, you know. So it's like, well, firstly, it's not, you know, for example, it wouldn't be how, you know, how it's called. It would be what, you know, and it wouldn't be it is. It would be is it. You know, so these are things you have to. They would use how. You know, again, that's a direct translation. They use.
They still make mistakes with word order related to whether it's a statement or a question.
What's it called? What is it called? You know, and it takes a while for them to get that down. Yes. So.
So I think, but it's fair to say, you and I have been here for years. In terms of the Czech language, we're like many expats. We don't really speak much Czech.
And that's the
thing.
But
because it's people don't realize, because if I had heard of someone that had lived years in a foreign country and still didn't speak the language at an intermediate level, I'd say, "Are you an idiot? Are you lazy? Are you stupid?" I would make a judgment. But once you come here and you realize how truly difficult, and it is difficult, the language is. And the other challenge is, most of the day you're working in English. You're an English teacher, so you're not using the local. You use the local language when you're in a shop or a restaurant. The rest of the time, with your colleagues who are also English teachers, with your students, you're using English most of the time. And when you're first here, most of your social circle, other expats, you're using English again. And actually, my partner, my girlfriend, she's Czech. We speak English. I don't speak Czech with her, so. I understand now. I mean, I'm sympathetic. There are cases where you live in a country as a foreigner for many years, and you still don't use much of the local language, except in limited ways. But it's just such a hard language, and so many things in it are just counterintuitive.
A few things. I mean, besides the fact that it's, it's not just the fact that it's very difficult. It's literally like you know, one of the most.
It's verbal Sudoku. It's like all the pieces have a relationship to one another, and you have to put all of them together in a correct way with every utterance. And it's like, I could learn to do that correctly, or I could cure cancer. It's going to take that level of effort to get it right.
Slavic languages in general are considered some of the most difficult in the world. Czech is considered one of the most difficult Slavic languages. Prague is a major, you know, metropolitan area with all sorts of people from, you know, international people living here, expats.
It is a very international city.
So almost everywhere you go, pretty much everyone speaks English on a good level, and you know, the Czech Republic is a very small country. Where in the world can you use Czech anywhere outside of this little country? Pretty much nowhere. You know,
almost nowhere.
It's almost pretty much useless. Even when, and I'm sure you've had this experience, you might try to use some Czech when you go to a store or a restaurant or whatever. They can hear that you're an English speaker, and they'll just respond to you in English anyway.
Well, I had a weird thing happen to me. I used to go when regular kind of, when I was still single, a group of other singles that we had the men's club on Sunday. We'd have lunch together, and then we would go to someone's flat and have coffee and desserts and a bit of whiskey. And we used to go to this pastry shop to buy the desserts. And we took turns buying the desserts, kind of sharing everyone would do it. A different person from our group, from the men's club, would buy the desserts each Sunday, so we'd share the cost. So it was my turn to buy. And I was pointing and using my basic check to pick out the desserts that I wanted to buy for our post-lunch coffee and dessert. And the woman's like, I speak English. You can speak English to me. Speak English. I can help you. Oh, I'm like, oh, so kind. So, because you also know that I've had many negative, well, most expats, but me especially, wait staff in this country tend to hate me for some reason. But she was
some strange bad luck.
I've had weird experiences in restaurants and cafes, and you've been a witness to this. These horrific interactions. But this woman was very kind and very helpful about it.
Yeah.
So I finished ordering the different desserts. She wrapped it up. I paid. We left. A few weeks later, it was my turn to buy the desserts again. We're at the same pastry shop. It's the same shop assistant. I'm like, oh, I know this woman speaks English. She was happy to help me in English last time. So I just, instead of starting in Czech, I just started in English. She was immediately annoyed. And I hear her grumbling while she's taking the different cakes. Oh, you just come and start speaking English, and we're in the Czech Republic. Bitching the whole time because she couldn't. Well, it's been like a few weeks, so she obviously didn't remember me. I had remembered her and that she speaks English. But she was visibly and audibly annoyed that I had just arrived at the counter and I started speaking English.
Right. It's like, but you told me before that you were okay with English.
I know, but I didn't start with Czech, and this is the other thing. I didn't start by trying to ask in Czech, and she hadn't forgot, or she had forgotten me from before, and now it's just this foreigner shows up and just starts speaking English, that SOB.
Yeah. I've also had some experiences before where I'll go somewhere. I went to Upinkasu, for example, this famous historic Czech restaurant, first place in Prague to serve Pilsner, the famous Pilsner Urquell on tap. Yeah.
Good beer.
Yeah.
Especially from the tap, the foam. The foam is like cream. Anyway.
The service there is, even for Czech standards, it's really bad. I still keep going there because they have this amazing interior design, classic Czech interior design, excellent traditional Czech food, and still one of the best places in town to get a Pilsner.
To get a pulled from the tank, from the tap beer.
But I've been there a couple times before, and they think that I'm, they just assume that I'm a tourist, and that, again, my Czech isn't great, but I can understand some things. And, my wife and I were standing there, waiting for somebody to come and seat us at our table. And the lady there was just completely ignoring us, and then to the point where she was going by me multiple times in and out, serving other customers. And then at one point, it was like she seemed annoyed that we were kind of like standing in her way. And she goes like, bull bets, which is kind of like, you're stupid or an idiot,
or nonsense,
She basically just called me an idiot, So it's like, we're still waiting for somebody to serve us here.
Well, but just for the record, like wait staff being openly hostile to customers is not unusual.
This is for Americans.
Not unusual at all here.
For Americans coming here, you need to prepare yourselves for that. They do not have. It is not that it's.
And you don't have to do anything. Your mere presence is enough for their annoyance. It's sufficient.
It's not service with a smile here. It's not the customer is always right. Things have.
Here, it's the customer can piss off down the road.
Yeah. Well, you've probably noticed, like I have, that it has improved a bit since we first arrived here.
It has, but we're talking now. This is like over a decade ago.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But especially when we first got here, 2012, 2013ish.
Most wait staff were still pretty pissy.
Absolutely.
If it was like a real Czech place, they were pretty pissy, and they didn't care about you. You could ask to speak to the manager. The manager also did not give a shit.
Yeah.
So, it was pointless.
Absolutely.
To complain.
And they know that they're Czechs basically don't tip at all. Like actually, I would say like a good number of Czechs that I know literally never tip, or if they do,
It's like 50 cents.
It's
Literally.
very low. Yeah. Like if it's good service, you can maybe tip 5 to 10% here.
Yeah.
You know, it's not tipping culture, and
Yeah.
so it's not like that. This is why they don't care.
Yeah.
It's a big part of the reason why they don't care.
Because
to offer you service.
because it's not a service culture. It's kind of
Yeah.
like a vicious circle. People don't tip because the service is bad, so the service don't care
Yeah.
because they know they're not going to get a good tip. So it just kind of perpetuates.
Yeah, they just seem like a lot of the servers here just seem straight up depressed, I would say.
Yeah.
Like they genuinely hate their lives.
Yeah.
So like even compared to the rest of Europe, even like for like Western European standards, this is considered bad here. There's
Well,
something
yeah,
about
I
when you
think
start to go
certain
further
elements have
east-
to do with the old regime, socialism,
Absolutely, yeah.
where once again service culture was non-existent.
Right.
They did not care.
Yeah.
There was the customer can piss off. They
Yeah.
did not care.
They did not.
They
It was like,
weren't going to get a tip, and they knew it, so there was no reason to be nice.
If you don't like it, go somewhere else.
Yeah, just
and
there's
we
the
don't need-
door.
we don't need your business, sort of thing. And believe me, and yeah, I know this might sound shocking, but it's even worse in Slovakia than it is here. Because really, like
How could it be worse?
the further east you go, it's basically the
How
the worse
did
it gets.
did you just arrive and they immediately start
Yeah.
harassing you? That's the only way it could be worse.
yeah. So
Because actually, for me, a good measure for me, at least, we're talking over a decade ago, is
Right.
if the wait staff are indifferent
right,
to my presence, like
Right.
they don't care about me, I'll take that over the pissiness.
yeah, totally.
But then if it's worse in Slovakia, we're talking about open hostility from the hop.
It's teetering on that.
Yes, for it to be worse than here.
Yeah, or they're just oblivious. You go to a store and it's like nobody is out. Nobody ever goes out. This is another major difference to help the customers. That are out looking.
Yeah,
somewhere in the
they
store.
are not
Hey,
there
can
to
I
help you. They are
Yeah.
not there to help
No,
you.
if you go to a clothing store, any sort of whatever supermarket, they in the U.S. or Canada, they have employees that are out walking on the actually in the store and in the aisles, not just up front. At the cash register. And you can, if you need something, you can go ask one of them in the States, that is, or Canada, or they'll oftentimes even come up to you, right, and say, hey, how's it going? Do you need help finding anything? Absolutely not going to find that here ever. You would actually have to walk up to the front, ask someone. When you do, they almost get this sort of worried look on their face.
Worried or
like,
more
oh, God.
typically annoyed.
Right, and they somehow.
Why are you talking to me? Why are you asking me something? They don't
Right.
want to help.
Yeah, the first few times I went to Tesco, which was our nearest supermarket in my first apartment here in Ondale.
Yeah.
3 different times I went there and I tried to ask the employee where I was looking for a certain product.
Yeah.
They never knew where it was. They had no idea even where any
They'll
of the
just say
products
it's over there.
were. Yeah, or one of them has, I don't know, around here
over
somewhere,
there.
or some of them are just
Go look over there.
Some of them are just like, I don't know. And they'll just walk away,
Yeah. They have no interest in assisting.
Yeah, and they're not
It
gonna-
was really
Yeah.
as you said, in the center of Prague, in certain shops, it has improved. It's shops and restaurants.
Yes.
Because the internet exists, and a lot of these businesses do rely on tourism.
Right, but it's incredible.
But once you get even to the outskirts of Prague or into the village, you're back into the service culture. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't give a shit about you. Why are you asking me
You get the
this?
feeling, yeah. I mean, they don't like that. That they actually have to, put forth some effort to help you. And B, you get the impression it's like they have no. It's just a complete lack of knowledge. It's like, did you just start working here?
They just don't care. They just don't want
That's
to
the
help
thing.
you.
But yeah, it's a combination of both. Yeah, they and they're not knowledgeable either. That's the amazing part. Like, they don't even.
But
take
why
the time.
would they need to be knowledgeable? They have
Right.
no interest in assisting you.
They don't. And
So there's no need for them to be
Even if they
knowledgeable.
did.
And the thing
Yeah.
is, a lot of, which would also surprise your average Canadian American, a lot of supermarkets and shops where you would assume there's a customer service desk. There is no customer service desk.
No.
So when you're at the checkout trying to buy something, if there is a problem, the person's just coming up and starting to talk to the cashier.
Right.
Because there is no customer service desk
Right.
for them to go to.
No,
it
there's
doesn't
not.
exist.
There's not.
It does not
yeah.
exist.
Good point. And then another one that I think is interesting to touch on, if you go to, let's say a cafe, restaurant, whatever, in the U.S., and Europeans get annoyed by this when they go to the U.S. They don't like it at all. In the middle of your meal or your coffee or whatever, they'll come over at least once, if not multiple times. Hey guys, how's everything? You need anything? Just let me know. They
Well,
never do
to
that
be
here.
fair, back home it's almost too much sometimes. The
It
wait
is.
staff is coming
Exactly.
like too much.
Sometimes it's
Here
like,
they
yeah.
they give you your food and they're gone.
Exactly. Exactly. So it would be nice to have some happy balance of both, but we're on like opposite ends of the spectrum here with these with these things. Sure. So, but yeah, that's it. Here, they might either take a very long time to come over to you, to see if you need anything else. You want to drink. You oftentimes have to flag them down. And sometimes. I just, again, the funniest interactions I've had, I was with one student and, even Czech, and she asked, for example, she's like, I want to try this. They've got all these specialty, they call them lemonades. It's almost like a soda here,
Sure.
And there was one flavor and she's like, how is this, and she asked her, the waitress, and she just said, I don't know. I've never had it before. And she just walked away. And
Yeah,
it's like,
they have no interest in helping you. It's just like, what the F do you want?
Yeah.
Don't demand too much and don't take too much of my time.
I asked the waitress at a cafe once. I said, can I get the Wi-Fi password, please? Or do you know what the Wi-Fi password is? And she just said, I don't know, and walked off. And I'm like,
they have no interest in helping you.
She didn't go, naturally. She could have just gone to one of the other employees who did know it. But she didn't, and she just was like, I don't know, and she just walked away.
But yes, once again, the thing
they have no
is,
interest in helping you. Yeah, I know.
The thing is, they don't want to help you with one thing because there's a long history of this bad service going back to the old socialist regime. If they help you with one thing, you're probably going to ask maybe a second thing.
Right.
So they just crush it at the beginning, like, I don't know. I have no interest in helping
you. Down. I'm going to shut you down.
I'm not going to make any effort. I could walk over and ask a colleague, or it's probably written down somewhere, the Wi-Fi code. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I simply say, I don't know, and I walk away.
Yeah, or in her case, so I finally went up and I asked one of the other employees at the bar, I said, hey, I asked the waitress over there. She said she didn't know the Wi-Fi password. Do you know it? And the guy was like, that's impossible. It's 1, 2, 3. He was like, she must have known it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah, it's usually like 1, 2, 3, 4 in the name of the cafe or something.
In her case, I don't even think it was just a matter of her, being too lazy to go and ask someone else. She might have actually known it, and it was just having a bad day and didn't want to give it to me. I don't know.
Also possible.
Yeah.
Entirely possible.
Yeah.
Entirely possible.
Again, the other guy was like, he's like, that's impossible. She must know it.
Yeah. Well, actually, where I work now is in a call center. And one of my colleagues, Peter, he's a lovely man.
Yeah.
His partner works in the metro in one of the kiosks where you can buy tickets. You can pay for your monthly pass. If you live here, there's a little window, and people work in there where you can go and buy your tickets or renew your monthly pass or your yearly pass. And so Peter's partner was told by his colleagues, like, you're being too nice. You're being too helpful. They actually told him, like, be meaner.
That's funny, yeah.
Yeah, because, I don't know, I think historically it was part of the service culture here. Like, don't be too nice. Don't be too helpful. People will just want more from you, and we don't want to do more.
Yeah, that's
so
a
I
good
think
point.
really whether that was expressly stated or like with Peter's partner where he was told by his colleagues, like, you're being too nice. You're being too helpful.
Right.
It was kind of an unspoken thing, like, we're going to keep our work to a minimum.
Right.
We're going to continue with this culture that's generally service that's unhelpful and not so much service involved.
Yeah.
And it's taken, even though we're now over 30 years since the end of the old socialist regime, there's still pockets, especially once you go outside the center of Prague.
Right.
Where you're going to get the old school Czech service mentality.
Anything you can do to, have like the least amount of output or effort, the least amount of work. Anything you can do to reduce work.
Yeah.
That's it.
But to be fair, as you said, it is slowly changing.
It is, yeah.
It is slowly getting better, especially in certain areas in Prague where there are lots of expats. The wait staff. One time, a woman in a pub, we went to a Czech pub. She was so friendly and smiling, and even touched my arm at one point. I was shocked, and I was having lunch with an English teacher, an old English gentleman. David, he was shocked because she was just so warm and friendly. And this was like in a true kind of old school Czech pub. It shocked us a little bit because it hadn't been our experience or our expectations. So it is slowly changing.
Sure. And maybe some of them now, when they see like, oh, a native English speaker, maybe there's a chance he could actually tip me, if I'm nice enough. So,
well, maybe at least in tourist areas, some of them have learned that like tourists will tip. So maybe if I am helpful and nice, maybe I can get a tip.
Kavarna Slavia, Cafe Slavia, across from
very
from
well
the National
known,
Theater.
right in the center of Prague.
One of the most famous ones. I've had multiple Czech people tell me that it's a very touristic place, but there are some locals that go there
It's
as
a
well.
nice cafe, and it's
Very
historic.
nice, classic, cafe, beautiful. So I've had multiple Czech people tell me that when they go there, the Czech staff will treat them much worse than their American clients.
That's true.
Than the American customers.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Because in a tourist area, they've learned if I'm nice, I'll probably get a tip.
Yeah.
Oh, here's some Czech people. They're not going to tip me anyways. It's like, sit down over there.
We're going to get stiffed on this one. Yeah, so just forget them.
So, sometimes you see the Czech-on-Czech crime of bad service because it's like, here's some Czech a-holes. They're not going to tip me anyways. Just sit over there. I'll get to you when I have a minute.
Right. So, whereas, again, like everything in the U.S. is so much about tipping culture, about customer service. The customer's always right, and people just go so far out of their way for customer service, and just the total opposite here. Yeah. So
it's actually, I think we've gone over time a little bit, so we'll have to bring it to a close here. Any other closing thoughts about life as an expat in Prague here?
No, overall it's pretty good. So you have to keep in mind when you look at like the average salary here, that would probably be considered like abject poverty for an average American, but the cost of living is also lower. So you can.
Although it has gone up in recent years.
It has. It has. Unfortunately, inflation has hit this country fairly hard, and it's had a very difficult time recovering from that. I have noticed the salaries have finally started to raise a bit too, which should be, which should inevitably happen. It should inevitably happen following inflation. The salaries should start rising accordingly. It's been taking a little bit longer than we would have liked, but it's starting to get better.
Slowly. I think the problem actually with some international firms is though they come here and set up an office and still think it should be super cheap Prague.
Right.
I can pay them the equivalent of €1,000 a month, and it's enough. And it's like, no, that's like maybe true a decade ago, but there's been inflation here.
I know.
And in a lot of ways, somehow COVID made things worse, like it did everywhere else.
Yeah.
So there's still that mentality, I think, with some foreign firms that they can come here and pay 800 or 1,000, the equivalent in Czech crowns of 800 or 1,000 euros a month, and that you can live on that in Prague. Not in Prague, anyways. Maybe in the village if you're in the village, but in Prague, especially because the rents have gone up here, and generally the cost of living has gone up here. It's a little bit harder. You got to hustle a little bit more.
But overall, again, the quality of life, as long as you get up around like that sort of average salary range, you can live a very high quality of life. And in fact, in many ways, some things are much more affordable because you know how in Europe here, honestly, I don't even know if you do this in Canada. So you do have everybody has healthcare in Canada, right?
Yes, we have a universal system.
And it's through your employer, right?
It's
automatically deducted from your salary from your employer.
Well, actually, it's actually organized through the provincial government. And some provinces, you don't even have to pay the premium. It is truly free, or it comes out of the tax base, basically.
One of the things I really like about the system here is that your employer just takes care of everything for you. It takes care of...
It's a deduction off your paycheck.
Your Social Security, your taxes, your health insurance are all taken care of by your employer, and all of these things are automatically deducted from
if you have a normal employment contract. Like when we were freelancers, we actually still had to buy our buy our health insurance privately.
Right.
We
Yes,
had to
exactly,
manage
exactly.
that. But once you
Right.
have a regular employment contract signed, then it's just another deduction off your paycheck.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Which is great. Which I like. You know, it's easy, and it's not even that much. It's not even as much as you would expect. And
Americans
you're covered.
expect pretty high values because they're used to pretty expensive.
Oh yeah,
health
in
insurance.
the U.S. it's ridiculous these days. It's just become flat out unaffordable for a lot of people. You know, and even the ones that have good health insurance, through their employer in the States, they still have to. I mean, they still have to pay like a lot of people pay like $1,000 a month or something like that for health insurance.
Yeah,
which is
once again,
crazy.
it's not typical here to have like co-pays and deductibles.
No, like pretty much everything is covered. It's
Pretty
full-
much, unless it's some unusual
yeah.
circumstances.
It's complex health insurance covered, so you're covered for virtually anything. No matter how severe the injury, illness, disease, or whatever. Like you're pretty much covered.
Pretty much.
If you want to get an ambulance ride, I heard it used to be like 30 crowns, which is like $1.50, and the locals complained, and now it's free. So ambulance.
The
rides,
ambulance is free if you have the insurance.
Ambulance ride is completely free, whereas it can cost $5,000 easily in the U.S. For a short ride.
Call an Uber if you're in America.
Right. So, like I said before, too, I like that it's very safe here. This is considered one of it is, statistically speaking, one of the safest countries in the world.
Yeah,
it's
here and Portugal are like at top of the list. Like there's petty crime and maybe property crimes, but like violent crimes are not common.
It's extremely rare, and you basically never hear of anyone getting murdered here.
It's rare.
Like exceptionally rare.
It's rare.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's very nice as well. And again, like I said before, the fact that like if your kid is good enough to get into a certain university, they can go.
Well, the university is free. Yeah.
Yeah, or close to free. Near it, and so that's the great part. Like, there's no such thing, as saving for college, like you always hear about in the U.S. We got to save up to put our kids through college.
It's not a thing here.
That's non-existent. Yeah,
it's not a thing here.
If
your kid is a good enough student, he can go to university.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love that as well. And then finally, another thing that I love about living here is just the ease of travel. The access to travel, and everything is just so. The public transport, for one, is multiple times better than almost anywhere in the U.S. Whereas outside of a few major cities in the U.S., the public transport options are not great. Or pretty much non-existent.
Non-existent in a lot of cases.
So
it's the same in Canada.
You need a car, whereas here it's actually, I would say, even kind of inconvenient to have a car. The gas, or petrol, as they say here, is always much more expensive than in the U.S. So the public transport options are great, phenomenal. Prague is one of the best too.
Prague has excellent public transport, and it's not expensive.
Extremely cheap. It's the equivalent of like 13 or 14 U.S. dollars a month, and that covers. It's unlimited. The bus, the metro.
$30 or $40.
No. When you get the yearly pass, it's 3,600 crowns, which is like 300 crowns a month.
Okay, well, I guess I do pay a bit more because I don't get the yearly pass. I buy every 3 months. I don't know why. It's just
you get that price reduction.
I guess in my mind, I'm still, I don't know.
300 crowns a month. It's like 12 euros, or like 13 or 14 bucks.
I pay a bit more because I get it like every 90 days, but it's still not expensive.
Get the yearly one, brother.
Yeah.
And I would say Prague probably has the most iconic tram that I've seen in Europe.
Yeah.
You got a mixture of these newer ones, which are nice as well, but they've still got the classic ones as well, which
the old socialist ones with the hard metal bucket seats, no cushion.
Right. But they've refurbished
the doors
a lot of
open
those.
every stop.
Yeah.
There's barely any heat in winter.
Exactly. Yeah. But. So that's great. And besides like the transport here locally or in the city, if you want to travel anywhere else, travel outside the Czech Republic, you can take the train. You still don't need a car. Like the train is so great. We can be to 4 other countries within a matter of maybe a few hours tops. On the train.
The closest I could be in Germany in an hour.
Prague is pretty much, again, Americans, they picture Prague when they hear the Czech Republic well, okay, a lot of Americans still think it's Czechoslovakia,
Czechoslovakia,
which is
yeah.
kind of sad because it's been over 30 years now since the
The
two
split
countries
between
split up.
Czech and Czechia and Slovakia.
But when they hear about it, they think full-on Eastern Europe. Like I've had multiple times Americans have been like, "Well, don't you directly border Russia?" And it's like, no, we don't. There are multiple countries in between us,
Yeah. Well, my first interview was with a Slovak colleague, and they clearly are. They're east of Czech Republic. At best, Czech Republic is Central Europe.
Yeah.
But they're east of us, and they still don't like to be called east because there's a stigma.
That's another great point. Yes. Pretty much no one in Europe likes to be called Eastern. Eastern Europe. I've talked to Czechs, Slovaks, Hungarians, Polish, who have all said, no, this is Central
Europe.
Excuse you, this is not Eastern Europe. I'm like,
this is Central.
I'm like, yes, it's Eastern Europe. Come on, even in the Czech Republic, it's Eastern Europe. But again, it's when you look on the map, it's actually pretty much smack dab in the middle of Europe. Because most Europeans, they also don't consider Russia to be part of Europe. So when you look at it, actually, it's pretty much right in the middle, and that gives you great access to travel. And if you want to go somewhere else that's a little further away than one of these bordering countries where you can take a train, then you have to take a flight.
Short flight.
It's still a very short flight. Amsterdam, an hour and a half.
We flew to Budapest. I think it wasn't even 50 minutes.
Southern Italy, even. Still just an hour and a half, from here. Everything is just
well, actually, a lot of Czechs will still drive. They'll drive to Italy. They'll drive to Croatia.
Oh,
they will drive. Actually,
totally
I went with our friend.
It's more expensive, too.
With our mutual friend, Luboš, who you mentioned. I went with him and his cousin.
Right.
And we drove through the night.
10 hours to Croatia.
We drove through the night, and by morning we were at the seaside in Istria.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, right.
And Croatia, beautiful country too.
Yes, when I tell people, when I tell Europeans, how far is your hometown? When I tell them about San Diego State University, well, how far away is that? I'm like, it's about a 12-hour drive. And they're like, what? Like it's in the same state, and it's not only are you not leaving the country, you're not even leaving the state. Yeah, so that's crazy because you can literally pass through 2, maybe 3, depending on the size of the country. You could easily pass through a few different countries in 12 hours.
Definitely.
So
you could probably, if you had a car, you could probably drive to France in 12 hours from here.
Yeah, maybe. Right. I don't know exactly.
It would be enough, I think, to get you across.
A little more, but not much. Yeah.
Germany and into France in 12 hours.
So that's great too. But even again, it's probably better to just fly because it's super cheap. The flights are very cheap here, unlike the U.S. where even just a one-way flight between San Francisco and my hometown Reading can be $200 to $300. You know what I mean? And it's only it's maybe like a 4-hour drive away.
And here, if you're willing to fly like the discount airline, it's super cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
$50 or something.
Especially if you go in the off season, even in like peak summer season. From here you can get round trip flights to Greece, which is probably 2, maybe close to 3 hours away, and it's still maybe like you can find them for like $150, 200 at worst. Much cheaper.
It's very expensive to fly in Canada, so it's the polar opposite. Because Canada, it's a huge country, and given the country's size, a relatively small population relative to the size of the country. So the flights and there's a lot of taxes and airport fees. It's Canada. So the tickets, like half of your flight ticket in Canada is taxes and airport fees. But at any rate, I also like that about Europe is there's so many places you can travel in a relatively short distance.
It's easy, it's fast, it's cheap, and then you're suddenly in a place that speaks a completely different
language,
completely different culture,
different food even.
Right. Whereas again in the U.S. I could take from California I can take a 5-hour flight east, to the East Coast. Yeah. And it's still, some American guy named Bob, that speaks exactly acts more or less
Bob
the same as I do.
Flipping your burgers,
Right.
Well, actually, to speak to the food, because Czechoslovakia at the time was behind the Iron Curtain, when things opened up here in the 1990s, like Italian food was exotic.
Right.
So having Italian pasta, pizza, that was like something new here in the 1990s for Canadians and Americans just to imagine that Italian food was considered exotic here in the 1990s.
That's funny, right?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sure. And even like it probably wasn't until the fall of communism, late 80s or early 90s, that they even got their first fast food here too, right?
Yeah,
McDonald's
it was not.
Probably wasn't here until maybe
no.
about 30 years ago or so.
No.
Yeah.
No, before that. I'm sure it was all the old school yidelnas, as they call them. These cafeteria style places with the pre-made hot food. You just come and order and stand at the counter and eat.
Right.
Old school. You see it if you watch the old Czech films.
Yeah.
All these old school places where you just go in, you stand there and eat, or even sometimes some of the have your beer. Stand there with your buddies at the end of the workday and just stand there and have your beers at the counter as well.
Absolutely. Well,
absolutely different, which is kind of nice. It is a different culture. And sometimes it's nice to go to old Czech pub and even get the bad service and the surly server.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, I'm getting the authentic. He was totally rude to me and he tried to steal my change. Like, I'm getting the authentic service experience. So it's kind of interesting in that way, I suppose.
And it helps that the beer is fantastic.
The service is bad, but the beer is usually good.
Best lagers in the world here. That we can have a whole other discussion on that one of these times. But they've got the best lagers in the world here for sure. And still a lot of foreigners or Americans, they might not even realize that. They might think of Germany, Belgium, but the Pilsner style beer originated from here. Yeah. And it is
in the town of Pilsen.
Yeah, and that is the world's most popular, still to this day, beer style by far.
Yeah.
And it comes from here, and they're fantastic. Yeah. But whether it's food or anything else, there's this diversity of life here in Europe, and like we said, in just a few hours away, whatever direction you go in, and just so many things that you can do in that regard and experience that you unfortunately just can't get in the States. You could take like my friends and I, sometimes we go to these Dresden soccer games, right?
I've never been to Dresden. I've been to Dresden, but not for a soccer game.
Well, this is great. You can literally just. My point is, you can just go. It's only a 2-hour bus ride away, tops.
Yeah, a 2-hour bus ride, and if you drive, it's maybe about an hour, so a little over an hour.
Literally,
if you go by car.
Literally, I can just come to you and be like, "Hey, Jeff, do you want to go to Germany for the day?"
Sure.
Yeah. And we can do that.
Yeah.
Like
we do it. Yeah, we do it all the time because actually, my girlfriend, her grandfather lives in a village right on the border with Germany. Yeah. So we go and we visit him. We pop across the border and do some shopping at a German supermarket in some village on the border. We have lunch with her sister and back on this side of the border, and we're back in Prague by the evening. It's an easy day trip. Easy.
Right. Yeah. How nice is that? That would totally be another shocker for Americans, right? Like you just go to another country for the day.
Yeah. And the German supermarkets are nice.
We're going to go spend the afternoon in Germany.
The food quality is actually a little bit better than the Czech Republic, so it is nice to go shopping at a German supermarket.
Exactly. And a lot of Czechs like going to Dresden. You see a ton of Czechs in Dresden.
Well, ton. We went there at Christmas time for the Christmas markets, and I only heard Czech. Yeah. When we were at the Christmas market in Dresden.
Sure.
So they get invaded by Czechs.
Yeah. I think ones that even live on the border, they might even go across to Czechs. They sometimes will go across the border to Germany or even Poland, where the quality of the food in the supermarkets is a bit better.
Poland is cheap. Let's be honest. Poland is about cheap shopping. It's not necessarily better quality.
But even in Dresden,
sorry, Polish people.
That's right. But even in Dresden, it's still cheap. Certain things are still much cheaper than here.
Yeah, even after you exchange from Czech crowns into euros, it's sometimes still cheaper or same price but better quality.
Despite the fact that the German salaries are higher than here, there's still a lot of clothes, for example, or like electronics have always been expensive here. And it's actually a lot of Czechs will take the trip to Dresden to do
the shopping.
To do the shopping. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we'll have to leave it there. We went a little over our time, but it was a good conversation. So thank you for being our guest today, Clay.
Certainly was. My
Yeah,
pleasure. Yeah.
I'm glad it took us a while to arrange it, but I'm glad you were able to come and we were able to have a chat about expat life.
Certainly, me too. Thanks, buddy.
All right. So to our viewers, thanks for watching. Please like and share if you enjoyed the episode. I hope you did. And if you're thinking of moving abroad, follow your feet. They know where to take you. All right. Thank you, and bye-bye.